You are now tuned in to the network, the YouTube channel that takes topics from CCNA and CP exams and dumbs them down to a more everyday language in layman's terms. This is section 6.1b, Telnet, HTTP, HTTPS, SSH, and HTTP. We may be doing those topics in separate videos. Anyways, this is a topic in the CCNP route exam. It will be known as the CCNP Enterprise exam come the year 2020. Let's go ahead and take a look at the exam blueprint and see where we came from and where we are headed. Hashtag labeveryday. All right, this is implementing Cisco IP routing. It's exam code 300-101. Again, when it's called CCNP Enterprise, it'll be 300-401. We just wrapped up the section 6.1a, console and VTY. Today we're going to do 6.1b, Telnet. It's a way for us to remotely log on to a networking device, right? Of course, if we're not in front of it, if we're not our console cable, console into the device physically in front of it, right? Then we would have to use remote services such as Telnet to remotely log on to it. So if you have a router that is all the way in China and you're in the United States, then that is how we remotely log on to it using Telnet SSH. Problem is, Telnet is not very secure. So let's go ahead and take a look at the official definition and some more information. So Telnet is a protocol used on the internet or a local area network to provide a bidirectional, meaning you can go onto it and come back with information, interactive text-oriented communication facility using a virtual terminal connection. Don't y'all like the way I say it? Just like it's a way to remotely log on to a device. You know what? Everyday terms. That's what my channel is about. Taking all this technical language and just saying it in everyday layman's terms, right? Anyway, shout out to this one user that sent me a message and he said, yo, I really like your teaching style. And even though I'm not really a Cisco certified instructor, but he liked this stuff. And he called me the Bill Nye of, remember Bill Nye, the science guy? He said, I'm the Bill Nye of networking. That's how I love that analogy, that comparison that he made. To me, that was a compliment. I just love that. Anyways, user data is interspersed, right, in band with Telnet control information in an 8-bit byte-oriented data connection over to the transmission control protocol. Blah, 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 blah. It basically stands for, why is that bad? Because if you're telnetting into a device, if somebody uses it, they can see your password, right? Over port 23. Here's a basic setup for it. First, we create a username and password, right? 0 is the privilege, so they don't really have much they can do here. So that's the username, that's the password. We go into the lines, the specific lines that we want to set up Telnet for. So in this case, we're setting up Telnet for lines 0 through 4. That's a total of 5 lines. 5 lines, right? Line 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 5 lines, right? And then we do transport input Telnet. That means we're going to allow just Telnet. That's not a good thing, but that's what we're doing in this example here. Here are some verification commands. Show running config. That doesn't work on my router that I'm going to do it on, or actually on GNS3. Show Telnet server. Didn't work for me either. Show hosts. I believe that worked. Show TCP connection also worked. So we're going to do the bottom two to verify Telnet connections. You can also do show run, but remember, you are challenging yourself when you do commands other than show run. That is how you are challenging yourself to look for information when you're troubleshooting. Let's go ahead and fire up GNS3 and play with a little bit of Telnet server tuning. So we're going to set up a little bit of a Telnet session and just fine tune it just a little bit. We got West Coast router on the left hand side, East Coast router on the right-hand side. They both sit in the 192.168.12.0 network. So very similar to the topology we worked in the last video. Step 1, configure router West Coast, which is this guy right here. So it sources all Telnet sessions from the loopback 0 interface. There's also a loopback on here. So let's see what interface it'll normally do. So we're going to go to East Coast, configure, terminal, enable, mode, configure, terminal. Let's do the line VTY 0 through 4 and no physical hardware for line 1. Interesting. Do show run. Let's see what we got so far. I did. So line VTY 0 through 4. Okay. So we're going to, we already have a password. Let's do transport input Telnet. So now we're going to allow Telnet sessions. Let's see what happens when we're going to enable mode Telnet to 192.168.12.2, I believe it is. Yeah, 12.2. So good. He's on. The password is VAULT is what you saw there. So that is the password. Again, you can get this from GNS3vault.com, and that's what he's referencing with that password there. We're telling that into it. But what interface are we using? Well, let's go to East Coast and find out what interface he's using. All right, the way we say we could do that is to display our Telnet sessions, we do Telnet or show TCP connection. The connection keyword is not available on my platform, so we have to do show TCP and then pick the line that we're going to show TCP connection for. So in this case, it's show. Well, let's do a show line, see which one we're using, right? Show line. We have a star there, so we're consoled into it, right? But the Telnet session is what we're looking for, right? He's disconnected there. Let's do that again, right? Now he's on. We'll do a show line again. There's the line he's using, line 0, right? Forget about the 1 and the 3 at the beginning. Just look at these last numbers right here. Line 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., right? Now, show TCP VTY 0. It's line 0, right? And that's going to break down our information for that interface. For that Telnet session, right? If we look up, we scroll up at the top of that output, localhost is 12.2. That's me. The foreign host, which is him, West Coast, he's using 12.1, and that's the port number he's using. But anyways, he's using that interface. They said they wanted us to use the loopback 0 interface, so that's what we got to change. How do we do that? We have to configure router West Coast to do that. So let's go back on West Coast and change that. We're going to get out of this, exit the Telnet session, and we're going to say configure terminal, and it's IP Telnet, and that's where we get the commands that we're going to use in this video here. IP Telnet, right? We don't have to worry about anything else. So he says he wants us to source them from the loopback 0 interface, right? How do we do that? There it is, right there. Source interface, specify source interface. So he says loopback 0, right? So we're going to say IP Telnet source interface loopback 0, right? So now if we try to Telnet into East Coast again, Telnet in the East Coast, you put the password in. Now we're telnetted in the East Coast. We run that, go back to East Coast and run that show TCP VTY 0 line, and notice you'll see the foreign host is quad 1. So he's using loopback 0. It's really, this is what it is. Virtual teletype or virtual terminal teletype from host quad 1. And that's how we change the source interface. Step 2, configure router West Coast so it uses DSCP value sessions. Yeah, I know that sounds a little Chinese there, right? Well, we need to go and break down our Cisco CCNA fundamentals. So now we really got to go back to our fundamentals with this, right? First of all, what is DCP value, right? Let's talk about what that is. Okay, so DSCP value is basically, remember this guy right here? This is the IP header. We studied this in the beginning of this video series, right? This is a fundamental here. This is the IP header that is tacked on all of your packets, right? That you send via IP. The TOS field is where DSCP is normally located in, right? Type of service is like quality of service. So if you know how you can prioritize your traffic, right? So like if you want VoIP services to get more priority, then you will set the value in TOS value, right? In the type of service field. You can also make less priority traffic and set it in this field here. Well, what are our options for TOS? All right, so this document right here, which you can find on the Cisco's website, I'll leave a link in the description below, DSCP and precedence values. This provides the values that we can put in that TOS field, right? In our IP header, used in quality of service, class maps, and policy maps, right? So remember, we prioritize our traffic. We can change if you want higher priority traffic, lower priority traffic, we're okay with it, like emails and stuff like that. That could be lower priority. Whatever the case is, we can set that value here. Well, here are the values, right? He wanted us to use the DSCP value EF for all Telnet sessions. Well, let's see what that is. Let's see. We look at this document here. We have the DSCP values right here, but this looks like in binary format, right? Well, let's see what our options are before we even set that up. Telnet. And what was our options here? Type of service is what we need to fix. We need to change here, right? So TOS, and it says here the TOS value is from 0 to FF. Well, what is that? That's hexadecimal, right? Well, the DSCP values listed in this document are in binary. So we got to do a binary to hexadecimal conversion, right? Which one do we know is EF? We see the priorities here. high priority traffic, flash, immediate traffic, critical. He said EF. There's EF. Here it is. EF is the meaning, but here's our DSCP value. That doesn't tell us anything. 101.110. So either some kind of converter or a conversion chart, a calculator or a conversion chart. Well, I did a research, Google search. This is, now remember, your Google skills are very important. I just did a Google search for DSCP to hex values. This conversion chart tells me what they are. We said 101.100, I believe. Yeah, we said 101.110 is the EF value. To convert that, right here, 101.110, that is the value we're looking for. 0xB8 is how we can put in the hex value. The type of service, hex value, is how we change it, right? So B8 is what we need to change it to, right? Not the 0x, don't worry about that part. So we go here, type of service, B8 is our type of service value that we're looking for. So we do that. Well, how do we verify that? Let's do a quick Google search to see if we can find that though. Yeah, I'm not too sure how to test that. So we're going to skip that one for now as far as viewing the DSCP value. If you know the answer to that, please put it in the comments below. Remember, you guys are helping me out while I try to help you out. This is the Lab Everyday community, so we kind of help each other out. So if you put your answer below, you're probably helping somebody else as well. Question 3, configure router West Coast, which is him again, so that way it doesn't show any informational telnet messages. That should be an easy one. Global config mode, IP telnet, and it is the mode that they want us to do, so that way it does informational telnet messages. Which one is informational? We've got two types. We've got hidden and quiet. Well, this says do not display addresses or host names. This one says don't display non-error telnet messages. That sounds like informational. So it's just IP telnet quiet. That is how we set it up. We can just do a show run, verify what we set up here, and there is our telnet settings right here. IP telnet source, interface loopback 0, TOS B8, and okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic, secure shell or SSH. What is SSH? It's a cryptographic network protocol for operating network services securely over an unsecured network. Typical applications include remote command line login and remote command execution, but any network service can be secured with SSH. We obviously use it for network services, remoting to network devices and put it in a secure channel, right? Because remember, Telnet uses port 23, but it's not encrypted. It is clear text, right? So SSH, it provides encryption. It uses port number 22. There's also two versions. That's SSH version 1, version 2. And the only difference is you must also configure a host name and a domain name to configure it. So as you can see here, we have our host name here. We have a domain that we've created here. We got a username and password that we have to create for an account to log on to an SSH device. We have crypto key generate. Well, this is how we generate our SSH keys. This is how we access the VTY lines, obviously, and transport input is how we allow SSH connections. These are some verification commands we can use. Show SSH, show IP SSH. We can also debug IP SSH. I believe we could have done a debug telnet session also. I'm not too sure. I didn't even try that. I should have done that. Anyway, let's go ahead and launch up GNS3, and we're going to use that same topology we did in the telnet session and set up SSH. So we're back to these guys right here. I basically just rebooted them, and they are back to our regular configurations. You know, IP addresses have been set up, and as well as the IGRP. So the first thing we want to do is we said we need to create a host name. Well, we have a host name. It's already East Coast, right? Next thing we said we need to do was create a domain name. We go to enable user exec mode, global config mode. We said IP domain, and what options we have there? We got domain, domain list, domain lookup, domain name. We said we need to do a domain name. What's the domain name we're gonna do? We're just gonna say eastcoast.com. That's all we need to do. So that's our domain. Excuse me. That's our domain name. Next thing we want to do is let's go ahead and create our SSH keys, which is crypto key generate. What are our options here? Generate RSA keys. RSA. We can do general keys, usage keys. We'll just leave it as is. That's the basic like generic keys right here. Choose the size of the key modulus in a range of 30. It's 360 to 2048 for your general purpose keys. So we're creating some general purpose keys when we do this. We choose a key modulus greater than 512. It may take a few minutes. Why? Because it's like the higher key modulus you create, the stronger the encryption. So 512 will be the least amount, or actually 360 is the least amount. 2048 is. So we'll pick the strongest encryption key. 2048 will do. Generating the 2048-bit RSA keys. Keys will be non-exportable. Still taking a while here to generate the keys here. That's why we should have done something, maybe half that. And there we go. SSH has been enabled. SSH 1.99, right? Next thing we want to do is let's go ahead and create a username. We're going to say username is network bruh. Let's say the password is XZIBIT. That's our password, right? You know what that reference is. Go ahead and put it in the comments below. You know where that's from, right? Actually, you know where this whole theme is going. All right, so we've done that. We've also want to go to our VTY lines, 0 through 4, and we're going to say transport input SSH. That's going to just allow SSH connections here. We could also do IP SSH, and our options here are authentication retries, how many times we can retry. We can configure logging for SSH, maximum concurrent sessions. We can get really deep into this, source interface, etc. Let's just do, we can change our version number as well. What versions are there? Version 1 and version 2. We're going to leave that by default. I believe that's SSH version 1, so we'll leave that as is. Now let's go ahead and log on to it via West Coast. So we're going to go from West Coast and SSH into East Coast, right? Now, but it's kind of like Telnet, but we have an encrypted connection. So we do SSH. What options do we have here? Well, we can select encryption algorithm. We can log in. That sounds like what we want to do. Select HMAC algorithm, options, connect to this port, the protocol version, and the host name. So we want to SSH and log in using the username. So we're going to say L minus L. Our username was network bruh. Next thing we want to do is put the IP address of the device. So in this case, it's 192.168.12.2. So we'll do that, and now we're being prompted for a password. The password we want to do here is exhibit, right? XZIBIT. We're being prompted here, so let's do, I believe it's the enable password. I mean the line password. No, let's do this. Let's make sure we get a login local here. Let's do show run. Says, yeah, we are doing login, but I think we have to do login local. So we're not checking for a local here. So let's do line VTY 0 through 4 login local. Why is that? Let me show you. Local password checking. We created a local account, right? So login local. I think that's our issue there. Now let's try to SSH to it. We'll do it again, right? SSH minus L. The name of it was, our username was network bro. The IP address is 192.168.12.2. Our password was XZIBIT. And now we're logged into the device. And that's what it was. We needed to log in local. So we're logged into the device. And that's pretty much it. We set up SSH. We're SSH'd into the device. We could do our verification commands, which was, we verify with show SSH, show IP SSH, and debug IP SSH. I guess we could have done that debug to see why we couldn't log on as well. That's what we should have done. Let's do that. Well, nah. Let's do this. Show IP show SSH. And there's our session right there. We have one session started. Username network bruh. Outbound. So the inbound, outbound connection. Session started, right? What else can we do here? We said show SSH and then debug IP SSH. We're going to do that debug to see what happened there as well. Show IP SSH. And basically shows the authentication timeout, when it will time out, which we saw earlier over here. That's when it exported timeout expired. So by default, it's 120 seconds, which is basically 2 minutes. And we had only 3 tries to log on to it. IP SSH, right? We can do client connections. Client connection debugging. So now we're debugging in the client connection. Let's see. Let's just do any kind of action. Let's exit. We've exited our session here. And right there, it says here, terminated normally. So we just did an exit. Let's try to log back on. Right? We logged that. We're prompted for a password now. What do we got here? says here, sent, the user version ID was version 1, Cisco 1.25, version ID is it's left blank, and that's basically it right there. So now let's put in the password and see what happens. Password was XZIVIT, and we're logged on, and there's no more action there. We didn't do too much there. Let's get rid of that client and just do debug IP SSH altogether. Incoming SSH. We're gonna exit out of this. What do we have here? Look at all of this stuff here we did with SSH just by exiting. Let's take a look at these debuggings. SSH receive packet, and this is us just logging off, right? If you want, you can pause it and freeze frame it here. This kind of helps with SSH sections. We probably could have seen what happened when we did the login local. I think that's it for SSH. Let's move on. Okay, next topic, HTTP. This is what you're probably familiar with when you're browsing the internet, and you probably don't even know that though, because you know you have to type in HTTP before you go into a website, right? Well, HTTP is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's an application protocol for distributed collaborative hypermedia information systems. HTTP is the foundation of data communication for the World Wide Web, where hypertext documents include hyperlinks to other resources that the user can easily access, for example, by a mouse click or by tapping the screen in a web browser. Just like I said, basically it uses HTTP port 80. It's clear text, and you can use it for GUI access on a Cisco device. So in other words, instead of doing the CLI using those commands like we've been doing with iOS and stuff like that, you could actually, go to a web browser and actually configure manage your devices through a web browser. And we could do that with HTTP. Here is just a simple, really simple configuration here. You declare a router as a server with this command, and with this command you can do authentication. But we're going to do just a little bit more with the lab that we got from GNS3 Vault. What else we got to say about that? So there's also a secure version, HTTPS, which we may do in the next video. I may or may not lab that up, but anyways, this is the port 80. This is the clear text version of it, right? So anyways, let's launch up GNS3 and play with HTTP server. All right, here's the lab we're going to be messing with today. It's a real simple configuration. We've got two routers here. One on the left-hand side is client router. One on the right-hand side is HTTP. They are both sitting in the 192.168.12.0 network. This is .1, this is .2. All right, step 1 says configure router HTTP as a HTTP server and make it serve files from the flash. Now, I was not really too familiar with configuring HTTP on these routers and stuff like that, so again, you can go to gns3vault.com for the video solution and stuff like that, and he explains it his way, right? So we go to global config mode. First of all the commands that we're going to be looking for in HTTP is just IP HTTP. And we do a question mark for the context sensitive help, and you can see all the HTTP commands, right? Starting from the top is here, right? So I'll let y'all look at that real quick and see which one is going to help us make this guy a server, right? Let me make this a little bit bigger. Right? You take a look at that, right? You can see server should be it right here. This guy right here, that will make him a server. So IP HTTP server, and that's it. That just makes this device a HTTP server. So from there, people can log onto our device if we make a website and stuff like that, they can get the files off of here and stuff, right? So now we're going to make it serve files from the flash. Now, if you take a look at those commands again, we just do IP HTTP. Which one do you think it is? Now, I had to take a look at this, and I took a guess, but I was like, I ain't gonna lie, I had to look at the video solution. But if you take a look at it, it's path. Set the base path for HTML. So we're gonna say IP HTTP path, and we know that the flash is under flash : and that's gonna be where we're gonna store our files, right? Let me make sure I do have a file on here, because we're gonna have to copy a file from it. Let me look at the directory. Okay, we do have one. All right, so step 2, configure router HTTP so it only allows HTTP connections. That tells us we have to make an access list, right? From port 5001, by default, HTTP is what? Port 80, right? And the 192.168.12.0 network. There should be a maximum of 5 connections. Well, let's go back to global config mode and look at the IP HTTP section and see what options we have here. Well, we scroll up some. Which one will allow us to do that stuff? Well, we see it says here, restrict HTTP server access, my access class. That's the first one. So we could do that, right? IP HTTP access class. Now we have to do an access list number. Well, we didn't create an access list. Well, we're going to have to do that. This is going to reference the one we're going to create. So let's say IP access class 5, and now let's create an access list. We're going to say access list 5. What do we want to do with it? We want to permit, what do we want to permit? The host name 192.168.12. Anybody from this network and anybody from this wildcard mask, and it will log our entries as well. That's pretty much what we created our access list. So now access class 5 that we created will reference this access list right here. So that's the first step. It said from port 5001 though, right? How we do that? Let's look at our commands again. IP HTTP. Oh, look at that right there. Set HTTP port. So that's what we were looking for, right? So IP HTTP port. What port number? We can do either port 80, which is the default for HTTP. We know that, right? But he said he wanted us to do, oddly enough, 5001. Context sensitive help lets us know that's the end. So we've did that. There should be a maximum of 5 connections. Well, that's under there as well. If we do IP HTTP, notice all of those commands are under IP HTTP, right? Which one is going to help us set a maximum of 5 connections? Pause it and look at this. All right, we're back. It's max connections, right? Set the number of maximum concurrent HTTP connections. You know how sometimes you go to a website and it says server busy because too many people are logged onto this or logged onto a website and their websites crash and stuff like that? Well, they may have set a number of max connections. We're going to say max connections, and he said he wanted max connections. We can do 1 through 16, and we'll just do 5 here, right? Step 3, configure router HTTP, which is this guy, so users have to authenticate to access the web server using the username, vault, and password safe. Now, here's the thing about this. If you just do the username and password, you're going to get a permission denied. You won't be able to access the files on here. So we have to grant him access, full privileges, right? So we're going to say username, right? He said the username is going to be vault, right? What else can we do after that? We got all these other options. But remember, and like I said, I already saw the video solution from Renee Molnar on his website, gs3vault.com, and he said that you basically have to set the user privilege to the maximum. So we're going to give him a privilege level. What's the options here? 0 through 15. We're going to give him full privilege. So he's going to be able to access our web server, do what he wants with it, right? So we're going to give him full access. We're going to give him the password of safe. That's that username and password. So that's step 3. Finally, step 4 says test your configuration by transferring a file stored on router HTTP to router client. Before we do all of that, let's see what we've got so far, right? We could do a show run, right? But remember, we said we don't like doing show run because we like to challenge ourselves with other commands, right? So there's the username and password with a privilege level of 15. We also have here, we have our IP HTTP commands that we just set, right? We set the directory. We said we gave them the server. Oh, we said secure server. Oh, it says no secure server. So secure server is HTTPS, right? So good thing we don't have that on there. There's no right there. So we've got access class 5, which is ACL5. Port number 5001, we made him a server. We also need to do IP HTTP authentication. And we're going to say local because we created a local username and password here, right? So that's what we're going to do. That's also what we needed to do there. Step 4 says test the configuration. So we're going to go, client needs to go to HTTP, get a file, and bring it back to his router right here, right? So we're going to go to client, see if we can get a file, right? So we're going to go to enable mode, and the way we do that is we're going to say copy HTTP : / what's the site? It's 192.168.12.2, right? We didn't give him a domain name. That's where, that's where browsing a website comes in. We take these IP addresses, put them in a domain name, so you ain't got to type in IP addresses like this. But anyways, copy HTTP : / 192.168.12.2 is the site. We give them a slash like this. What was the name of the file? Let's check. dir. And there's the name of the file right there, http://confg. That's basically the startup configuration file. If you're wondering how to get that file on there, I didn't have any files on that router. I copied the startup config to the flash, And that's how I was able to get a file on there. I didn't have no files on there. It took me a little to figure that one out. But anyways, now we're going to copy this from, oh, we got to do the port number, 5001. Don't forget that. And then we're going to say, we said this was a file name. And then we're going to copy it to null. We're trying to copy the file. Permission denied. Why do you think we got a permission denied there? We tried to basically did an HTTP get. If you're not familiar with it, what that is, when you're browsing a website and you try to get a file, like, I don't know, you click a banner or something like that, it does an HTTP get. Get that file. Give me the information from this banner right here and bring it to my screen so I can see it, or link get to it. That's what you're doing here. Why do we get permission denied though? We didn't do a username and password, right? So when we're on a client, let's try to get the file using the username and password. IP, HTTP. What options do we have here? We need to set our client parameters right here. So client, what does he want us to do? We want to set, let's set the username. What did we say the username was? Vault. So ICTP, HTTP client, vault, or username, vault. Now we need to do IP, HTTP, client what? The password. Right? We need to do the password now, right? HTTP client password. What do we say the password was? Safe. Safe. So now we set the username as Vault, the password as safe. Now let's go back to user exec mode, or privilege exec mode, and see if we can get that file. And notice it says here loading, copied. So we copied the file to our directory flash right here. One more thing we want to do, I did this almost pretty much in the same exact order. And notice we got the fail here because of the access list. We didn't get granted permission there because we didn't put a username and password. We do a show IP HTTP. What options we have here? Client or server. Let's say client and see what client information we have here. We have client all. Let's do server. Let's do server all. Status, actually. Status. And this is information on our status. We got port number, authentication method is local. We got access class number 5, so that's the access list. The maximum number of connections allowed, which was 5. Server timeout, etc., etc., etc. That is all I am going to cover today. I know that was that section said we have about 5 protocols we wanted to cover, but y'all know I don't like to go over 30 minutes. We did Telnet, SSH, and HTTP. In the next video, we're gonna maybe we're gonna do HTTPS, and I believe we have to do SCP as well, secure copy. I think that's all we needed to do. Anyways, that's my YouTube page. That is my Twitter handle. Go ahead and add me on Twitter. Please leave a comment below on how I can improve these videos. Obviously, I need a better mic and a better camera. I'm using the default webcam here. Share this video if you like my teaching style. Please hit the like button. I appreciate all the comments you guys send me, messages that I get and stuff like that so I can improve this channel. Go ahead, like, comment, subscribe to the network, bro.